that we'll discuss, we'll carry forward the discussion from where we had stopped yesterday. But before we do that, as I was saying, predicting history even in a one-day period is a complicated affair, right? Many people are like, nahi, yehi jeetega, wohi jeetega. This party will get 400 par, 500 par, or whatever par, nothing par, right? So, both history and politics are more complicated. At least we can learn one lesson, that things are often more complicated than they seem. And while people may live in their echo chambers, especially in an age of social media, and those of you who have read Gramsci, who have read Gramsci, anybody? No? Yeah. So those of you who have read Gramsci, those who have read about the role of the media, it's a good question on the relevance of the media also. Okay. So today's day is a significant day because the only other prime minister ever to get a third term after Nehru could not become Nehru, because Nehru's third term was a clear victory, was a simple majority, 272 par. But the only other Indian prime minister to secure a third term will not have a clear majority. That much is clear. Whether that's good or bad, and whether India will return to a coalition era or not, and blah and all that, that's not for me to comment. But that's for you to observe. And that's for you to understand and realize that, as I was saying yesterday, I think this is a very great day to learn one history lesson for sure, that often those of us who take history as a given, that this is going to happen, this was meant to happen, ye to hona hi tha. Often history teaches them a sobering lesson. So that is there. Now let's not dwell into it any further. For the coming days and weeks, your newspapers will be filled with editorials to analysis regarding the same. But it would be fun to watch the coming days. There will be many potential prime ministers that you will hear about in the next 4 or 5 days. From a Nitish Kumar to a Mamata Banerjee, to Mr. Modi, to Mr. Gadkari, to Mr. God knows who, right? And it will be interesting to watch. Here, let's come back to where we should be, because that's not my area. And also because there is this camera, I guess, problem. Now, in terms of what we had discussed yesterday, quickly to revise, we talked about briefly the decline of the Mughals, the rise of regional powers, the advent of Europeans, and also, and this was in this period from 1700 to 1800, right? 1800s onwards, I had said that the 19th century or the 1800 to 1900 period involved, and in fact, one could say that from 1750 all the way up till 1850 is a period where the British East India Company, as I told, was establishing what? An indirect rule. And the British Crown and the British East India Company were involved in a tussle over who would have administrative control. And by the way, as I had said, that the direct rule often was of whom? The direct rule was often of princely states. Now, what you see after this is that after 1857, after the revolt of 1857, the Crown said that it is a proof of the fact that the East India Company, which was carrying out whatever administration, is incompetent to carry out administration. It is time that all administrative powers from the East India Company are taken away. So after 1857, you see there is a direct rule established by the British Crown. And the East India Company administrative powers are stripped away. Stripped. In the East India Company, the administrative powers were stripped away. So that was during this period or during these 100 years. The British East India Company, roughly after 1878, was dissolved also. The company ended all its activities after 1878, roughly, but that's not what we're interested in right now. But I hope that this transition is clear. Okay. Now, 1900s to 1947, what is happening? A broad trend I am talking about, just 2-3 points here. I'll not go into detail because we'll eventually come into details later. See, 1885, the Congress is formed. 1904 is the partition of Bengal, and then a movement against it. And then this was followed by a movement against the partition of Bengal. What is all of that? I'll explain in a minute. You just kind of write it down. Hero ki entry happens in 1970, right? That is Gandhi, right? So Gandhi's entry on the scene of the Indian freedom struggle in the Indian subcontinent happens roughly after 1915. 1916 he comes and then he spends a year, and 1917 he starts to actively get involved in nationalist politics in India. Before this, Gandhi had spent 20 years, more than 20 to be more precise, 22 years in South Africa. Between 1892 to 1914, 22 years Gandhi had spent in South Africa. Gandhi was himself 44-45 years of age when he came to India, or when he returned to India. And this happens after 1914, 1915. And 1917 onwards, Gandhi becomes active on the scene of Indian politics. And for the next 30 years, Gandhi is a very important player in Indian nationalist politics. For the next, these 30 years are also called as the Gandhian years of the Indian freedom struggle. Okay. Before this, as I was saying, that 1892 to somewhere around 1914, for these 22 years, Gandhi was active in South Africa. How many of you have seen the movie Gandhi? No? Those of you who have not seen the movie Gandhi, you should listen to our third-time Prime Minister and watch the movie Gandhi. The third-time Prime Minister also comes from the land of Gandhi. He is himself a modern incarnation of Gandhi. There's absolutely no doubt about it. He preaches truth, non-violence, not speaking hatred towards others. I'm talking about the new Gandhi. Right. The old Gandhi also came from Gujarat. The new one also comes from Gujarat. Some of you may not get the pun. A couple of weeks later, you will start. Okay. Now getting the pun. Okay. Now, what is important is that movie Gandhi, where Attenborough, you should definitely watch. Okay. It is one of the most watched movies ever, played by Doordarshan. Okay. And अभी मत देखिए, 20-25 लेक्चर हो जाए हमारे, उसके बाद देखिए. You will understand it much better. It's a well done movie, and it's Gandhi is one individual on whom the more you can read, the better it is. There's no limit as to how much you need to read on Gandhi. And that also brings me to the question of books, which books to read and all that. Let me just complete this timeline, then I'll come to the books. Okay. Now, by the way, let me first tell you one important point of distinction here, and that is about the Congress. See, the Congress was formed in 1885, but the Congress as an organization kept on changing from time to time, meaning the Congress in 1885 was different from the Congress in 20 years later, in 1905, was different from the Congress another 15 years later when Gandhi came under the leadership of Congress. So the name of Congress remained the same, but its leadership, its objectives, its agendas, its strategies, they all kept changing. So Congress was like an umbrella. Different leaders came under it. At different times, different leaders were leading the Congress. In 1885, people like Dadabhai Naoroji were leading the Congress. 20 years later, you have people like Bal Gangadhar Tilak leading the Congress. So, for example, just to give you the context, people like Dadabhai Naoroji, etc. were leading here. People like Tilak were leading roughly around this time. People like Gandhi were leading Congress roughly around this time. So Congress leadership also kept changing. Its demands also kept changing. Okay. So it would keep changing with time. So just to say, why am I telling you this important point? You will find that Congress in 1885 is a very weak institution. Doesn't have any mass following. Okay, I'm just giving a broad picture. Please understand this, that parties also rise and fall with time. There are times or eras in which parties are strong, and there are times or eras in which parties are weak. So it's not always unidirectional, they will rise or they will decline. You will find many parties rise and decline over time. So Congress, when it began, was a very weak party, did not have a mass support base, a pan-Indian presence, or lakhs of people supporting it. It was not the case. And for 20 years, in this period, almost for 20 years, it remained such a situation where the Congress was a party with some presence in a few urban centers in India, no rural presence, no mass presence, no mass leader. Okay, so it was a weak institution. Things started to change with the coming to the leadership position of more aggressive, or more, by aggressive I don't mean violence, I'm saying more aggressive meaning those who were more capable of involving the masses. And there came people like Tilak and others, which took Congress towards a more mass turn, meaning slowly Congress started reaching out to more people. Now, here is an important point for you to understand again from the perspective. This is a time, there is no internet, there is no television, right? There is no internet, there is no television, there is no radio, no internet, no television, no radio, no social media, no WhatsApp forward, nothing. What is there? There are only two ways of reaching the masses. One is public speeches. The other is the press or newspapers. Okay. So reaching to the masses was not as easy as it is today. Nobody's speech is going viral and lakhs and crores of people are listening to them. Building a mass base is a more time consuming process, something which was limited also by the absence of any mass media or mass methods of communication, except for the press or the printing press. Okay. So it's a slow and a long drawn affair, which will happen somewhere around this time. It takes some 20 years. But 1907 is a year which is an important year that you will eventually remember, because this is the time when Congress is split, meaning Congress breaks into two. And His Excellency, the then Governor General of India in 1902, had said that it is my dream to form a Congress Mukt Bharat. And he was Curzon. Curzon was the Governor General of India in 1902. And he said, that is my personal desire. I will ensure the demise of Congress before I leave. He was the Governor General in 1902. Curzon left in 1904. We are not discussing right now Curzon. He is very, very important. One of the most important Governor Generals of British India. Questions have been asked in prelims and mains both on Curzon. He is very, very important. Okay. So, but 1907, though Congress had started becoming a bigger organization, it receives a huge setback in 1900. An important date here, if I was to say, would be another. Which date? Congress split. So Congress again becomes what? Broadly, I am telling you right now, so that you get a picture, right? Congress again becomes what? A very weak institution. It had started to rise, but it again fell. By when? 1907. And for the next 10 years, from 1907 to which year? 1907 to, for the next 10 years. Okay. And don't worry, I'll give you another way of looking at it. For the next 10 years, Congress is again a very dormant institution. Congress है कि नहीं है, यही नहीं पता चल रहा था. Or whether Congress existed or did not was itself a matter of some debate. So for the next 10 years, from 1907 to 1917, so if I was to say from 1885, the Congress is a weak institution, or if I was to say Congress had a limited what? Support base. Building a political party takes time. You should ask whom? Arvind Kejriwal. Arvind Kejriwal in 2014, after the India Against Corruption movement, said that we will contest seats in Delhi and we will contest all 545 parliamentary seats. And out of the 545 parliamentary seats that the Aam Aadmi Party contested in 2014, it won 0. It's a full 100% strike rate. Building a political party is not an easy task, especially building a national political party is a time consuming, resource consuming and leadership consuming process. So when the Congress started in 1885, nobody was expecting also the Congress to all of a sudden become a pan-Indian organization. Okay. It took the Congress some 20 years and it did achieve some growth. As I said, by 1904, there was leadership of Tilak and Congress had started building some mass base. But 1907, as I told, is the split of the Congress, and Congress again almost became an institution, a very weak institution, and almost went into a sort of a hibernation. Word hibernation, polar bear, chala jata 6 mahine sone, comes out, is weak, is malnourished. That polar bear, hibernation, we all have studied somewhere in school, right? So the Congress in 1917 was a very weak institution, and one of the important Congress leaders in 1907 के बाद in 1908 had gone to jail. Tilak went to jail in 1908. Yes. Next, what happens after this is that for the next 10 years, Congress is a defunct institution, it's a very inactive institution. Tilak is coming out of jail broadly in 1914. आपको अभी चिंता करने की जरूरत नहीं, मत लिखिए, जो मैं लिखूंगा बस उतना लिखिए, but आपको बता रहा हूँ. Tilak is coming out of jail, he is a popular leader. 1914. A couple of years later, Gandhi comes onto the scene and he is also popular, and both of them are mass leaders. Whom? Tilak and Gandhi. And Tilak in 1914 is released from jail. And 1917, Gandhi comes to the scene, and both of them are active leaders and leaders with some mass appeal. And for the next 30 years, Gandhi is there at the helm of affairs. Tilak dies in 1921. So Tilak's died in 1920 end. So Tilak's death happens, and after that, the only other major senior leader with a serious mass appeal is Gandhi. And for the next 30 years, Gandhi is there. And it is under Gandhi's umbrella that many other new leaders rose. You had people like Jawaharlal Nehru, you had people like Subhash Chandra Bose, and many others were there. But Gandhi and Congress were not the only players in the Indian freedom struggle. And over 30 years, Congress grew as a mass party. It took Congress 30 years to actually grow as a mass party. It did not happen overnight. It did not happen just because Gandhi came to the scene. Okay? It is a long drawn process. So while the Congress and Gandhi were one stream, another stream, and Gandhi, as we all know, had a very strong emphasis on non-violence. If Gandhi, Congress and non-violence were one strand of the Indian freedom struggle, there is another strand of the Indian freedom struggle. And that another strand of the Indian freedom struggle is that of those who picked up arms against the British. So I am not right now talking about them, and they are important both from your exam point of view and overall to understand the freedom struggle also. They are the militant nationalists, or those who picked up arms against whom? The British. Militant nationalists हम उनको बोल रहे हैं. We are saying those are militant nationalists who picked up arms against the British. Everybody has heard of the name of a Bhagat Singh, right? So at least everybody's heard the name of Bhagat Singh, right? So whether it is Bhagat Singh, you have Chandrasekhar Azad, you have Khudiram Bose, you have the Chittagong Army, Surya Sen, you have the Gadar Party. Everybody has heard some names. Subhash Chandra Bose and the Azad Hind Fauj. Some names everybody has heard, and it's an important streak, but we'll not go in there right now. But it is. Right now I'm just telling it. One important thing that almost no student in the beginning understands is that whatever is happening on the Indian freedom struggle between 1900 to 1947, 1900 we call the period of 1900 to 1947, or this period itself from 1885 to 1947 as the period of rise of Indian nationalism. What is nationalism? I have not discussed right now. But for simplification purpose, you can say nationalism involved here two sets of sentiments. One sentiment that the fate of all Indians, is tied together. Meaning, for a person living in Bengal and for a person living in the Bombay province, their fate is tied together. Okay, or they belong to one common political community. They do not necessarily belong to a religious or a language based community. They belong to one common political community. Their fate is tied to each other, and they have a common enemy against whom? They have a common enemy, and that is the British. Okay. Now, while this is happening, while Indian nationalism is rising, it is influenced heavily, and Indian freedom struggle is influenced heavily by two or three big important international events in which India is not the primary player, but India is heavily influenced by them, and India also takes part in them. One is World War I. In World War I happens where? Right? If you see, 1914 to 1918 is World War I. 1918, there is another important event, and then 1939 to 19, the third important event. Three international important events. This is which event? World War. This is what? Anybody? The Russian Revolution. And this, as you all know, is World War II. Yes, three important international events had a huge impact on the Indian freedom struggle and on India's attainment of independence also. Okay. How and why? This is very important from your mains examination point of view. Direct questions are asked on this. Because in one question, it gives the examiner the chance to link some understanding of world history with an understanding of modern Indian history. Right now, I'll not go into the detail. India, by choice, was not involved in any of these three. There was no choice that India made to be involved in any of these. In World War I and II, India was involved by compulsion. The compulsion was why? Because we were a part of the British Empire. And the British Empire needed a large number of soldiers to fight in World War I and in World War II. And I'm just giving you one way of understanding it, that in World War I, 1 million British Indian troops fought on behalf of the British Crown. Where? In Europe, in West Asia, in North Africa. Meaning 10 lakh Indian troops fought in World War I. In World War II, 2 to 3 million British Indian troops fought. Meaning 20 to 30 lakhs. That's a huge number, right? In fact, India was one of the major suppliers of troops to Britain, without which Britain would have had a tough time winning in World War I and II. So as we'll see, this would have a big impact on the Indian freedom struggle. And there are many other reasons also why World War I and II impacted. Let me give you another broad sense. What happens? You have a Russia-Ukraine war going on right now. Everybody has heard about it, right? Now, you may have heard that Russia produces a lot amount of oil and gas, and Ukraine produces a lot amount of wheat. Ukraine is the bread basket of Europe. सबने मोटा मोटा सुना होगा कहीं ना कहीं, right? All of you may have heard broadly. Ukraine produces a lot amount of wheat. Russia produces a lot amount of oil and gas. Now the war is ongoing. I'm simplifying and telling you things. As the war has been ongoing, the international prices of wheat as well as the international prices of oil and gas, have they gone up or down? Meaning, when often global wars happen, it leads to what? Inflation. Yeah, महंगाई. Almost a decade ago, not a decade, almost 15 years ago, I think, Amir Khan made a movie, Peeply Live. Have you heard about the movie? No? Okay. But you should. There was a very popular song that you would have heard. Sakhi. Anybody heard the song? Sakhi सैया तो खूब ही कमात हैं, महंगाई डायन खाए जाते. ऐसी पिक्चर अभी नहीं बनती. Basically what I'm trying to tell you is, it was a basic way of saying that people earn a lot, but inflation eats people's wages. If inflation happens, and this, it's kind of ironic that we're talking about it today. Global inflation has been on a high. You see within South Asia also, globally also, inflation's been on a high, okay, including in India. Other countries have had even higher rates of inflation as compared to India. In fact, India has had relatively lesser inflation as compared to many other areas. But inflation, do you think it makes a government popular? It definitely doesn't make any government popular. No government in history, elected or unelected, monarchy or democracy, has survived high prices? If I go back in history and start giving you examples, you may not relate because right now you may not know much. But when France fought a lot of wars in 1789 and before that, inflation increased in France so much that food prices became so high. So the queen was asked, as you may have heard somewhere, that people are suffering from high prices. The queen said, okay, if they can't eat bread, let them have cake. Long story cut short, high inflation led to public protests in France against the French monarchy in 1789. 20 years later, Napoleon faced the same situation. High prices and decline in popularity. Just telling you broadly. समझ लीजिए. World War I happened. It will have high inflation where? In India and the world. It also had high inflation where? In Russia. And the Russian economy was so negatively impacted by the war that the Russian government could not pay salaries to its soldiers. People suffered from high food prices, so much so that the Russian monarchy, which had been ruling for 300 years, was overthrown in Russia. And this was called the Russian Revolution. And those who came to power were the ones who professed that they are followers of the ideas of Karl Marx. ये एक और जंतु हैं, जीव हैं, जो आप मान लें वो हैं, जिन्हें आप जरूर सुनेंगे. यूपीएससी की प्रिपरेशन नहीं होती मार्क्स के बिना. आई एम नॉट सेइंग बाय सपोर्टिंग मार्क्स, आई एम सेइंग बाय understanding Marx, critiquing Marx, and you will find in your prelims also and in your mains also, in GS also, questions have been asked. For example, they asked a prelims question that with reference to the ideas of Gandhi and Marx, which of the following statements are true or false? Okay. It has often been said that the future debates with the ghost of Marx. Okay. Marx is dead. Marxism also may be dead. Left is nowhere left, either in India or anywhere. But Marx and his ideas continue to be debated. Okay. Why and all, either you would have read in political science or you will read in GS somewhere, and we will discuss also. But those who came to power in Russia were the ones who claimed that we are followers of Marxist ideas and we will form a government of their own. This will be a government of workers, is what they said. Broadly, मैं आपको बता रहा हूँ. Workers who work where? In factories. Okay. Or workers who work in agriculture. It will be their, broadly speaking, government. And you see that this was the Russian Revolution. Why is the Russian Revolution an important event? Is because it led to the formation of such parties elsewhere also. Communist parties started being formed all over the world, including where? In India. 1921, the Communist Party of India is formed after the success of the Communist Party in Russia. And it is not a coincidence. Okay. And we will see in Indian freedom struggle also, apart from Gandhi and whom? The militants, apart from Congress, there were those who picked up arms. I told you, militant nationalists. They were the third also. Whom? The communists. Okay. So I said initially Congress and Gandhi. Then I said the militants. Third, I am saying whom? The communists. These all communists. They are born because of whom? The Russian Revolution. A revolution that did not happen in India. A revolution with which Indians had nothing to do when it happened, but yet were influenced by it. What am I trying to tell you? Many people assume that because a country does not take an interest in a particular war, for example, Indians were not taking any direct active interest in World War I. We were not fighting, the Indian states were not fighting for territory in World War I or World War II. And they were neither involved in the Russian Revolution. But a big understanding of learning of world history is, and history in general is, just because you don't take interest in wars doesn't mean wars don't take interest in you. Every time a major international event happened, some in which India indirectly participated, like in World War I and II, because indirect participation, because Indian troops are being involved, and some in which India did not participate, like the Russian Revolution. They all deeply influenced the Indian freedom struggle. On all the three of them, questions have already been asked in the mains examination in one way or the other. Okay, so we'll discuss this also. So one thing you will find, when India attained independence in 1947, India was not the only country which attained independence. Between 1945, and this is an interesting piece of evidence, between 1945 to 1960, do you know how many countries attained independence from Britain and France? Almost close to 60 countries attained independence from Britain and France. In Asia and in Africa, you would find a number of countries attained independence from whom? Britain and France, the two major colonial powers of Europe. Did Britain and France win in World War II? Yes. देखिए, World War I और World War II में जो वो हैं कौन? Thanos. The only Thanos in World War I and II is Germany. देखिए, Thanos, Avenger, आपकी भाषा ये है ना? तो Germany is the principal opponent in World War I and II, and it lost both in World War I and II. And Britain and France won in World War I and II. And you will see that despite winning wars both the times, Britain and France suffered heavily. Okay, why and all of that we'll see later. We will see that Britain and France, despite winning both in World War I and in II, became what? Weak. देखिए, ऐसे समझना अगर आपके लिए मुश्किल हो रहा है, you can win wars and yet become weak. How? I'll explain when we'll discuss the decline of Mughals. Just hold it for now. ठीक है? That they became economically weaker, militarily weaker, despite winning both World War I and II, Britain and France. Why? I'll explain later. And as they became weak, a number of countries, including India, saw it as a right moment to assert more strongly than ever their demand for independence. So India is not the only country which attained independence from Britain. Almost close to 50 to 60 countries in Asia and Africa attained independence from Britain and France. So yes, international events had a big impact on the Indian freedom struggle. I hope this much is clear. Right. So this is what I want to stop the timeline on. Just to give you, this is what was the broad sense. Any doubts till here? Anything that you want to ask till here? No questions? Very nice. Now you can ask questions outside the classroom also. Not to me, to the government. The third term will be very different from the first and the second term. History will remember it. The only problem with you is that you have gained political consciousness now. If you would have gained political consciousness 10 years ago, you would have now enjoyed the difference. You will now see that the Indian Supreme Court will now come out in its true colors. This is the मोर के पंख बारिश में निकल आते हैं. In rain, the peacock shows its vibrant colors. You will see Fali Nariman, the father of Rohinton Nariman, was a Supreme Court judge. And Fali Nariman himself was a very senior Solicitor General, an exceptionally well-known lawyer, wrote in 2014 that it is the test of the Supreme Court will now happen in 2014, he wrote. And he said, after Indira Gandhi, India has had a prime minister for the first time with a clear majority. This is the test of the Indian judiciary. Whether the Indian judiciary passed or failed in the last 10 years is something that we'll discuss in political science. 7 years ago, I was teaching Pol Science class in 17 when the then finance minister, Mr. Jaitley, had tabled the electoral bond and introduced it as a finance bill and everything. And I was teaching the election commission as a topic in the class. And I had spent 2.5 hours explaining to the classroom that why almost on every basis the electoral bond is an unconstitutional thing. And a very genuine student stood up and asked, all your research is very fine. We don't need it. If it would have been unconstitutional, the Supreme Court would have struck it down. And I had no answer. Because obviously I'm not more knowledgeable than the Supreme Court. 7 years later, you found that the Supreme Court struck it down. The question is why it took 7 years to the Supreme Court. I'm pretty sure they are much more knowledgeable than I am. But even a peacock needs the right moment and the time to show its true colors. A lot of you may still not get it, but the next 1 year will be of D.Y. Chandrachud, the son of Y.V. Chandrachud, the former Supreme Court judge. And D.Y. Chandrachud, after a long time, India is seeing a Chief Justice with a 2-year term, which is spent almost a year already, but he still has a 1-year term ahead of him. Right? So India and the Supreme Court will have a new love affair developing in the coming few months and years. Why? Because this third term is a coalition era. Okay, so it's a power relationship. I told you, it's a zero-sum equation. Right? Now, coming back here, I hope this much is clear. Next is to talk about books. Okay. Now, next is to talk about books. A lot of you would have a question कि sir books, notes, क्या कैसे क्या? Let me answer आपके 4-5 बड़ी simple चीजें. See, up till now, what we were doing was I was just giving you a timeline. Now, what I'll be doing when I discuss a topic with you, I'll dictate you certain notes in the class. You should read those notes. Second, I'll give you a handout. You'll get a printout or a handout in the class for every topic that I'll do. You should read that handout also. And then will come the book. Very clear rule is that while you are reading history or modern Indian history, you should try to bring everything together in one notebook. Okay? Why? Because at the time of revision later, you should have everything together at one place. Okay? You should not be running from one book to the other 1 month before the exam or 1 week before the exam. So, what we discuss in class, you'll write down in the class notes. Now, whatever handout that I give, you will go through it and you'll find a few additional points there. These additional points, after the end of every topic, you leave 1 page and you can add those additional points there. And you can add some sticky notes also on the side and get your additional points there. Then you will read the book. Okay. And in the book also, you may find 1 or 2 additional points. Unlikely that you will find many new points while reading the book, but you will find something very valuable while reading the book. Learning how to articulate and write sentences. See, a lot of time when you will go to answer writing stage, you will be like, sir, I understood the topic, but I am unable to write. It happens for 2 reasons. One reason is that you often read the topic once and you think you will write an answer. No. You have to read the topics at least 2 to 3 times. And I'll explain that later. to be able to write answers. That's one. You have to revise 2 to 3 times. Before that, you really can't write a answer, because MCQ is about picking the information. Answer writing is about reproducing from your existing knowledge. So one thing is you will need 2 to 3 revisions. But apart from it, also you need to read from a good source. Meaning, what is the point of reading a textbook? A textbook is how and where you learn how to write a sentence, how to put your point in few words. This is understood only by reading good text. Okay, so the objective of reading the book is not so much to find new information, but to learn how to express the same information in better manner. Expression is a art that you slowly develop with time. It will help you in your CSAT also, it will help you everywhere else also, because slowly you will develop the ability to develop reading skill and expression skill. It is a slow process. So the objective of reading the book is not to find new information. वो information we have found here. But still, to slowly improve articulation and answer writing, reading a good standard text on a topic like modern Indian history is very useful, because it is coming both in prelims and mains and has very high weightage. I will not say that for every topic you need to read a book. For example, for world history, I never say that you should read a book, because the weightage is less. Okay, but for modern Indian history, you should read a book. But reading the book comes at the third stage. Notes, handouts, and then you read the book. Okay, don't first read the book. Koi zarurat nahi. If one thing you want to do before coming to my class is go through the last 10 years prelims question papers and last 5 years mains question papers. Try to solve the prelims question papers also. Okay, that is something that you should try to do. Now, book, coming to the book, देखिए, and there is no separate need to make notes of every chapter from the book. वैसा कुछ नहीं, ठीक है. You will read the chapter only when I'll tell you कि you can now go ahead and read these chapters, so you read them. Additional points, if you find something, you only add that to the notes. That is it. ठीक है. Book में, for example, a lot of people will say कि sir spectrum पढ़नी होती है, हम सबको पता है. Somebody will say spectrum भी पढ़नी है, but बिपिन चंद्रा भी पढ़नी है. Somebody said ये सब बुकें पुरानी हो गई हैं, अब आ गई है. There is Shekhar Bandyopadhyay's Plassey to Partition. Shekhar Bandyopadhyay's Plassey to Partition. Somebody else will say ये सब कुछ नहीं पढ़ना है, NCERT पढ़ना होता है. Somebody will say NCERT old वाला पढ़ना होता है, new वाला नहीं पढ़ना होता. Somebody was like 6 to 10th वाला पहले पढ़ना होता है NCERT, फिर 11 to 12th वाला NCERT पढ़ना होता है ना. और somebody will say सर ये सब बातें हो गई पुरानी. You are also outdated, your books are also outdated. Penguins published a book with Ipsita Banerjee Dubey. I think by Orient Black Swan it is, not from Penguin. Ipsita Banerjee Dubey on modern India. ये पढ़ना है, ठीक है. Somebody would say नहीं हमने S Chand publication का कुछ आता है वो पढ़ना है, ठीक है, कुछ और भी होगा. Let me tell you, somebody said सर ये सब आप लोग एकदम बिका हुआ हिस्ट्री पढ़ा रहे हैं. हम somebody who is a more Marxist leftist orientation would say सुमित सरकार पढ़ना होता है. And somebody would say नहीं नहीं ये सब आप रहने दीजिए, हमें अपना इतिहास पता है. Some other book, God, J. Sai Deepak may have written some book, how knows. So, my simple one-liner suggestions. Bipin Chandra also comes in 3 forms. One is by Orient Black Swan publication, Modern India. One is by Penguin, India's Struggle Till Independence. And the other is Bipin Chandra's NCERT. Let me tell you, there is no question of you reading 2 books. You only have to read 1 book. No, at no point you should be reading 2 books. because you don't have the time to read, revise. It's just not possible. You have so many other subjects to do. My suggestion, the only book that you should be reading, and while making this suggestion, I'm just saying you read the old NCERT for 11th class by Bipin Chandra, which is written by Bipin Chandra, or so you read either the old NCERT by Bipin Chandra for the 11th class, Modern India, or you read what? Or the only other thing that you need to, or the only other book you can consider reading is also by Bipin Chandra, which is by Modern India again, which is by Orient Black Swan publication. Orient Black Swan publication. These books, these books are roughly 250 pages. They are not very big books. They are concise books. Okay. So इन दोनों में से कोई सी भी एक आप पढ़ सकते हैं. ये दोनों एक ही है. ओल्ड एनसीईआरटी अब पब्लिश नहीं होती, उसको ओरिएंट ब्लैक स्वान ने लेके has published in the form of a book, which is Modern India, Orient Black Swan publications, roughly around 250 pages, Modern India. That's the book that you should read. Many of you will be like, sir, this is all nonsense. Spectrum we have to read. We have already been told by seniors, juniors, YouTube, Telegram, everywhere. It is Spectrum. See, Spectrum has certain good factual information in 1 or 2 chapters. Like social reform chapter is given, facts have been given well. You don't need to worry. We will give you that in the class and the handouts. So don't worry about Spectrum or reading Spectrum cover to cover. If you want to read Spectrum, there are hardly 1 or 2 chapters that you can read from Spectrum, hardly 30-40 pages. There's no need to read. But I will suggest you to read any of these 2 books cover to cover. Okay, there's no need to mug up things or anything. Just read the book cover to cover only after I've done those topics in the class. Don't read it right now. Otherwise, it will sound like a Harry Potter book. If you've read Harry Potter, if you've not read Harry Potter, it's okay. So don't read it right now. But this is one of the 2 books that you should read. There are better books than Bipin Chandra in the market. I am telling you not to read them. Like Ipsita Banerjee Dubey is a good book. Like Shekhar Bandyopadhyay's Plassy to Partition is an excellent book. Lekin if you start reading Shekhar Bandyopadhyay's Plassy to Partition, हो गया आपका UPSC, आपका नहीं होता है. Unless and until you are a history graduate, unless and until you have studied political science at the school, at the college level before, it's unlikely you will be able to make too much head or sense of the book. The language itself is very difficult. आपका गिव अप हो जाएगा, आपको लगेगा ये पढ़ना होता है तो इससे अच्छा रहने देते हैं, है ना. और आपको ये रियलाइज कर लेना चाहिए कि जिनका सिलेक्शन हो रहा है वो भी नहीं पढ़ते हैं किताब. ठीक है. Whatever is relevant from there, from Shekhar Bandyopadhyay, from Ipsita Banerjee Dubey, in the class or in your notes, I'll give it to you. Questions directly line by line in your mains examination have been asked from Bandyopadhyay's Plassy to Partition. They picked up a line from Bandyopadhyay's Plassy to Partition and just added 1 word ahead of it, discuss, and told you to write answer. But still I'm telling you not to read, because you will spend too much time, you will make little head or sense out of it. I will give it to you in the notes. Okay, you will get it there. Okay? Or in the handouts, you will have it. The language of the handouts at times may seem difficult to you because it is meant to be difficult. Okay? क्योंकि इसमें कुछ चीजें ली होंगी बंदोपाध्याय से या कहीं और से, तो आपको भागने की जरूरत नहीं है. That we will do for you. Done. So this is the book that you should be reading. Don't be in a rush to read the book, but for Modern India, you should read one of the books. Notes, don't worry, I'll do. Answer writing, MCQs, all of that we'll talk about later. MCQ is a very valuable tool in the modern Indian history preparation. Ideally, you should be doing MCQs more once we have completed 15-20 lectures, you can slowly start moving towards doing MCQs. And which MCQs I'm suggesting? You can do the last 10 years MCQs, you'll get a good sense, additional information. Done. This is about the book. Anything you want to ask about book, notes? Yes. कुछ हाँ अभी आप पहले जो मैं आपको बोल रहा हूँ बस आप इतना करिए या तो even if you want to use the study material provided by the coaching, then that you can do, but I would suggest you use the class notes as a second. At the book level you can use because that is also largely based on that. If you want to just pick up a book, देखिए किताब खरीदने में ना संकोच नहीं करना चाहिए, पर पढ़ना बहुत सोच समझ के चाहिए क्योंकि टाइम आपके while you're buying a book, one need not think 10 times. It's a 250 rupees book, you can buy it. Coffee आपका या कुछ और आ जाता होगा उतने में, है ना? तो it's a good book. I'll still suggest you should buy Modern India by Bipin Chandra, either the old NCERT or the Borean Black Swan one, whatever it is. Now, any other question? Okay, great. Now let's start the first topic, decline of the Mughal Empire. That's the topic that we'll now start in detail. At the start of every topic, I will tell you what all areas we will cover in this and from where all questions are asked, both in prelims and main. One important thing, I hope you all know this by now. Anyways, if you don't, I'm telling. There is no question of preparing first for prelims and then for mains. We will prepare for prelims and mains integrated manner. It's not that first 10 classes are for prelims, then are for mains. Nothing like that. Right from day one, it's about preparing both for every topic comprehensively, both for prelims and mains. So when you talk about the decline of the Mughal Empire, we will be covering the period from if I was to tell you, we'll be covering the period roughly from 1700 to 1739. Okay, this is the period that we'll be covering. And in this, we will first try to understand a brief timeline also of the decline of Mughals. We would also want to understand the causes, brief timeline, and some of the, if I was to say, some of the key events associated with the decline of Mughals, the causes of the decline of Mughals, and the consequences of the decline of Mughals. We will also try to understand the Mughal administrative, the later Mughal administrative structure, I should say. But because देखिए Mughal administrative structure हम यहाँ बहुत डिटेल में नहीं पढ़ेंगे because that is studied in medieval India. Okay. So, but later Mughal administrative structure we will partly discuss here. Mughal administrative structure also we will discuss here. Mughal administrative structure. Now, in your prelims examination, questions from Mughal administrative structures have been repeatedly asked that we'll discuss. Causes and consequences related questions are directly asked in the mains examination. And key events, some of them you should know for your prelims examination point of view. Now, if this is a broad breakup of what we'll cover. देखिए, when we talk about the decline of Mughals, let's first go into a brief, everybody's written this? Let's first go into a brief background. And here, as I had told you yesterday, that 1526, the formation of, or it is under whom? Babur, who came from Central Asia, and from Central Asia he went to Afghanistan, and from Afghanistan he came to Delhi or North India in 1526 in the first battle of Panipat. And laid the foundation of whom? The Mughal Empire. Okay. $30 later, इसके बीच में there is Humayun, right? Humayun we are not talking about because we are not interested right now. But it is after this, 30 years later, the grandson is Akbar. And Akbar, when he came to power in 1556, he was roughly 13 years old. Okay. 13 years old is a kid. So he was a kid. And his empire, or the Mughal Empire, then was a very small and unstable empire. Okay. He came to power because his father, Humayun, had died. Okay. Accident में इधर गिर गया वो, suffered accident and died. Staircase, he fell and died. So he comes to power, he's 13 years old. The Mughal Empire is very, unstable. Slowly, there is a very important battle here, which is fought actually by his military commander, Bairam Khan. And we are not discussing that. But in that war, they won. Whom? Akbar won in the second battle of Panipat. When? In which year? 1556, 30 years later. In Panipat, again, there is a battle. Within the Mughal Empire itself, there is political instability, etc. I am not going to the detail of this battle also. We don't need to right now. Okay. Now, Akbar won in 1556 and consolidated his hold. Over where? And consolidated his hold over the empire. That's one. Then, as from 13 years, he eventually became 23 years. And after that, for the next basically 50 years, Akbar is ruling. I told you, it is in this period that Mughal Empire expanded where? In North and Central India. Akbar, for example, during this period, worked out a relationship with whom? The Rajputs. Worked out a relationship with the Rajputs and with other important individuals. And the Mughal Empire became somewhere like this under Akbar. Yes. And this happened from 1556 to 1606-7 period. That the Mughal Empire consolidated itself. And I'm not going into its detail because we don't need to. I'm just giving you that background so that if you've never heard about the Mughal Empire, you must have some sense. Okay. The Mughal Empire consolidated its hold over North and Central India. 50 years. And then, as we discussed yesterday, the next 50 years are under Aurangzeb. Now I will go into a bit of detail. Okay, that is, ये बीच के 50 years हम उड़ा देते हैं फिर से. For now, there is Jahangir, there is Shah Jahan, there is Jahangir, and there is Shah Jahan. In these 50 years, we are not interested right now. Then comes Aurangzeb for the next 50 years. That's 1656 all the way up till his death in 1700 1656 and all the way up till 1707. Done. In these 50 years, what happens? And now let me tell you a bit of detail. Okay. See, Shah Jahan was the ruler in 1656, and Shah Jahan had, we don't need to get into this, how many details of how many sons they had, etc. There are four important. So there are four sons. Okay, two of the important ones were, Shah Jahan had four sons, and two of the important ones were whom? In 1656, Shah Jahan's two important sons were Dara Shikoh and whom? Aurangzeb. Okay. Dara Shikoh was the eldest son. Aurangzeb was not the eldest one. Mughals had no such rule that the eldest son has to become the king. There was no such rule in the Mughal Empire. And this idea that the eldest son will become the king, it's called primogeniture. Okay. So there was no rule of primogeniture, or there was no such rule that the eldest son will become the king. So, but Shah Jahan, the eldest son, was Dara Shikoh, and Shah Jahan wanted Dara Shikoh to become the next king. But Aurangzeb obviously wanted to claim power for himself. And any transfer of power, whether in Mughal Empire or empires in general, was often a tricky affair. Meaning one ruler being replaced by other in a peaceful democratic process is a historically fairly recent phenomenon world over, including where? In India. That is one of the beauty of democracies. There are two beauties of democracy, or there are two very unique things about a democratic political system. One is that the transfer of power is supposed to be what? Relatively peaceful, without any major resort to violence by either sides. All sides agree to a common system. The one who wins according to that system gets to taste power for the next defined period, for a particular defined period. That's one. So democratic systems have a relatively smooth system of transfer of power, whether in Mughals or in any other princely states. Otherwise, what would happen was that if the old king died, then amongst his sons, there would often be a bloody and a violent conflict. And the rule would often be unwritten rule would often be that the one who wins in this bloody war will go on to become the next king, because the one who wins this bloody conflict is the most capable one, and let the most capable one rule. So if there are four sons, the four sons can fight amongst themselves, kill amongst themselves, do whatever amongst themselves. Whoever wins or stands last or is standing at the last will become the ruler. Amongst Jahangir's sons, amongst Shah Jahan's sons, this is what happens. Aurangzeb kills every other son of Shah Jahan as he rises to the throne. And the most favorite son of Shah Jahan, whom Shah Jahan wanted to be the king, was Dara Shikoh. But Aurangzeb beheaded Dara Shikoh Aurangzeb beheaded Dara Shikoh, imprisoned his father. ताजमहल शाहजहां ने बनवाया था. शाहजहां, just adjacent to Taj Mahal, Aurangzeb placed his father Shahjahan in a house arrest, killed all his brothers including Dara Shikoh, sent his head, apparently it is said, now I don't know whether he did send his head or not, but did send his head to his father. Please be assured, I am the king. And this is how Aurangzeb did rise to power. He did kill Shahjahan, he did kill Dara Shikoh, he did behead Dara Shikoh, and Dara Shikoh's body is buried in the mass cemetery, which is in the Humayun's tomb, which has the burials of many a later Mughal rulers. Dara Shikoh is also buried there. Now let me tell you an interesting fact and an important one. The Archaeological Survey of India is keen on finding the grave of Dara Shikoh. Where? Within the Humayun's tomb. More than 20-30 later Mughals are buried. Where? In Humayun's tomb. And they are unmarked graves, meaning aapko nahi pata that under which grave who is buried. Okay. So the government, the ASI wants to find where is Dara Shikoh buried in the Humayun's tomb. Why this interest of finding where Dara Shikoh is buried? That's important for your exam point of view. It's a curious question, right? Why would be the government interested in finding the grave of one particular ruler? Why not anybody else? Right? The answer is that Dara Shikoh is a very important individual from your prelims examination point of view. Okay? In the sense that Dara Shikoh, for example, was one who translated the Ramayana and the Mahabharata into Persian. He also translated the Upanishads into Persian. He was well versed in Indian religious scriptures also. And there were many other things about Dara Shikoh's uniqueness that I'll tell you or give it to you in a handout. Dara Shikoh is considered to be an individual who was very much in favor of, a better understanding of all religious, social and cultural practices of the day, whether that were of Hindus or Muslims. So that is there. Just I'm एक आपको सोचने के लिए दे रहा हूं कि आपके अखबार में भी आपको मिलेगा कभी ना कभी दारा शिकोह पे कुछ ना कुछ आता हुआ आगे. जब भी आपको दारा शिकोह का नाम दिखे पढ़ लीजिएगा, because it is important for prelims. Just a pointer right now. I'll give it to you some details in the handout also. Okay, but for now you should know. Coming back to whom? Aurangzeb. Aurangzeb beheaded Dara Shikoh, came to power, and for the next 50 years he's power. But Aurangzeb did so. Killing brothers to come to power is not a new phenomenon, either in the Mughal Empire or outside the Mughal Empire. But imprisoning his own father was something new. Mughal rulers also had not previously imprisoned their fathers, who were then the existing rulers also. But Aurangzeb did a new thing, and that is that he did imprison his father also. Why did I tell you this useless story? Beheading brother, imprisoning father. We are not watching Game of Thrones. Right? I told you this useless story, or some will say a useful story, is because it establishes one important point, that Aurangzeb is known by many to be ruthless against his opponents. Okay. So that is something that Aurangzeb demonstrated while dealing with his brothers as well as with his father. And that is the reputation with which he came to power in 1656. And what he did next was that it is under Aurangzeb's period that going south of where? Which river is this? Narmada. And Narmada should come from here. So going south of the Narmada into whose territory? The legendary Sharad Pawar. देखिए आप और हमारा जो मिलन हुआ है वो बहुत देर से हुआ. if you would have, for you to understand all the puns, like many people don't understand how important Sharad Pawar is. You will understand in the next 2 days. इस देश में शरद पवार का जो स्टेचर है वो लोग महाराष्ट्र वाले जानते हैं, और जो महाराष्ट्र वाले भी नहीं जानते फिर तो मतलब शरद पवार इज शरद पवार, है ना. There are few people who could make the Ambanis talk to each other. Whom? Mukesh and Anil. Sharad Pawar. Sharad Pawar is one individual who can make anyone talk to anyone. Everybody knows that. Okay. The legends of Sharad Pawar will be discussed in history time and again. When the mother was pained that her 2 sons were fighting over property, whom did the mother call? Sharad Pawar. Who's the mother? Kokila Ben. Kokila Ben called Sharad Pawar. And Sharad Pawar is like, come Mukesh, come Anil, let's sit and talk. He's the guy who gets things done. So, coming back, I'm talking about which region? Deccan region, right? So, in this Deccan region, it is Aurangzeb who makes his mark. And after coming to power, from 1660 to 1690, for 30 years, Aurangzeb fought wars in Deccan, dealing with 3 potential strong players in the region. And these 3 important players, one are the Marathas. This, for example, were the Marathas. But there were 2 other important players also. One was Bijapur and the other was Golconda. The rulers of where? Maratha territories were there. There was Bijapur and there was Golconda. आप सबने गोलकोंडा फोर्ट का नाम तो सुना होगा, है ना? ऐसे ही समझ लीजिए अभी के लिए. So there's Bijapur, there is Marathas, and there are Golconda rulers who ruled in the Deccan region. Your Maharashtra, your Telangana, your Andhra Pradesh regions, your Maharashtra, your Telangana, your Karnataka regions, the Deccan. Okay. And it is in this Deccan region that Aurangzeb fought wars for 30 years between (1660 to 1690). So, a prolonged Deccan Wars. This is the background that I'm telling you. The prolonged Deccan Wars. These are the wars that they fought in the Deccan region, right? So they're calling them the prolonged Deccan Wars. The prolonged Deccan Wars fought between 1660s or fought over 3 decades between 1660s to 1690s, eventually saw Aurangzeb expanding the Mughal Empire into the Deccan or into Deccan by defeating whom? Bijapur, Golconda and Marathas. By 1700, the Mughal Empire under Aurangzeb was at its territorial what? Was at its territorial what? The Mughal Empire under Aurangzeb was at its territorial peak. Was at its territorial peak. So, now we can ask the question that we need to ask. Ki sir, you said that the Mughal Empire is Deccan Par. Mughal Empire has reached its peak by 1700. Then why does it start declining after 1707? Then you can tell to me, ki, sir, what is the big deal in explaining why the Mughal Empire declined after 1707? Aurangzeb died, so Mughal Empire declined. Now, I'm not saying there's something wrong in saying this. What? That Aurangzeb died, so the Mughal Empire declined. But it is an incomplete what? Explanation. Or it is an insufficient explanation. Why? Because history can be seen as like this. What? That Akbar came, so Mughal Empire rose. Aurangzeb came, so Mughal Empire rose. Aurangzeb died, so Mughal Empire declined. If you were to start seeing history merely as a set of, or if you start seeing history as an outcome of who came to power or who lived and who died, then it is very difficult to explain why some empires last for 200, 300 years and others end in 10 years. Right? Because no ruler lives for 300 years. The Mughals started somewhere in 1526. That was not the first time when a ruler died. Akbar also died. Then Mughal Empire could have declined then. Humayun also died. Mughal Empire could have declined then. Babur also died. Mughal Empire could have declined then. Every time a ruler dies, an empire can decline. Doesn't happen. Right? You see, US has been a predominant power in the world in the last 75 years. Many prime ministers have come and many presidents have come and gone in the United States. But the power remains. So history cannot be merely seen as a set of events decided by who comes to power and who dies. Because such explanations may be an insufficient explanation. So I am not saying that Aurangzeb's death did not contribute to the decline of Mughal Empire. It did. But it is not the only reason. And can I say that it is not even the major reason? The camera is there. Otherwise, think of current rulers also as rulers who lead an empire. No ruler has died right now. But if I was to say that the empire of one party is witnessing some decline, if not a great decline, right? Why? That you will find in your newspapers in the coming days and weeks. Somebody may say unemployment is rising, somebody may say inflation is rising, somebody may say this is rising and that is rising, and because of these reasons and that reasons, the popularity of XYZ party declined, and so its seats declined. Whatever it is, XYZ, whatever the reasons are, whatever the party is. But what am I saying? Nobody has died, right? But the fortunes keep rising and falling. If I was to say that history has to be only seen as a rise and power or fall of an empire merely by rise and by the birth and death of a ruler, then it's a very incomplete explanation. Why? We will see right now when we'll talk about decline of Mughal. So yes, Aurangzeb died and the decline of Mughal Empire starts becoming visible following the death of Aurangzeb. We will see the causes of decline run much deeper. There is much more. Even if Aurangzeb would have lived, he would have sat upon a declining empire. Okay. So why am I saying so? So to understand the causes of decline, देखिए अब क्वेश्चन जो आपके मेंस एग्जाम में आएगा तो वो आएगा, ऐसा क्वेश्चन मेंस में नहीं आता है टू बिगिन विद, एंड आई विल इवेंचुअली टेल यू कैसे आंसर राइटिंग करना है एंड ऑल दैट, बट क्वेश्चन ऐसा मेंस में नहीं आएगा डिस्कस द कॉजेस ऑफ डिक्लाइन ऑफ मुगल एम्पायर, ऐसा कोई क्वेश्चन मेंस में नहीं आएगा. मेंस में दे डोंट गिव यू स्ट्रेट फॉरवर्ड क्वेश्चन कि आई डिक्टेट टू यू write down causes of Mughal Empire, decline of Mughal Empire, and they ask you, yes, what you wrote in your copy, you have to write it here. Write the causes of decline of Mughal Empire. So I'm already telling you a straightforward question will not come. How questions will be framed, I'll explain later. But when we talk about the causes of decline of an what? Empire, please understand that these causes, there are different ways of looking at it. और causes of decline of an empire पूछूं मैं आपसे, या causes of French Revolution पूछूं, या American Revolution, या Russian Revolution, या causes of any historical major event आपसे पूछा जाए, if anybody asks you a causes of any major historical event, how should you approach it? There are two ways of approaching. One, immediate cause, and the other is a more long-term cause. Another way is to look at what are the political, economic, social, or causes related to the army or defense. For example, if I was to say rise of US power at the global level, what are its causes? Okay, one can say the way I should evaluate that, were there certain political reasons that contributed to the rise of the United States? Were there certain economic reasons? Were there certain social, religious, cultural reasons? Were there some causes or reasons related to the army? Now, it is possible, say, rise of US, French Revolution, Russian Revolution, you can think of any major historical event in such terms. However, one thing you will find is that different historical events, in some historical events, say some political and economic causes may be more serious. In some historical events, big historical events, some economic or military causes may be more serious. So, students also while preparing for UPSC at times adopt a very mechanical approach, saying कि अच्छा हाँ ठीक है सर समझ गए, इसमें क्या ज्ञान की बात है. Every answer cause आया question में, we have to write 4 points: political, economic, social and army. यही कह रहे ना आप. तो why are you trying to sound more complicated than it really is? Why are you making it sound more complicated than it really is? It's not the same. Though I am telling you that these are 4 different dimensions in which you can look, you may find that in a French Revolution, maybe while writing the answer, you should focus more on political and economic. Why? Your answer should focus more on political and economic. Why? Because they were the bigger causes. It is not enough to know what are all the causes. You should also know which are the major causes and which are the minor. And while writing answers, which causes will you write first? The major. And while writing answer, how much space will you give to a cause is decided by, is it a bigger cause or is it a smaller cause? If 50 years later a historian writes that why the BJP got a coalition or why the BJP did not get a clear majority in the third term, there are political, economic, social and causes related to Agniveer in it. A historian would be expected to also explain which of these causes are bigger causes and which are more peripheral causes. So while writing an answer also, you are expected to not write equally on everything. You are expected to explain which are the bigger causes and explain them in more detail. Do you get it? Right? So it's not just important to know कि हाँ सर हर में 4 ही पॉइंट तो लिखना है. कई आंसर्स में आप 3 पॉइंट्स पे ही पूरा टाइम स्पेंड करेंगे, चौथे में कुछ खास नहीं है लिखने को, because it's not a really big factor. Is that clear? Do you get it? Do you get this point? That meaning in the next few days you will see in your newspapers article analysis deciding and discussing what led to the election result. Somebody would say that these political and economic causes were the real reasons for XYZ party's rise or fall. Somebody may say there are some social reasons. There are reasons related to caste, religious mobilization, caste mobilization, this, that, etc. Others may focus more on politics and economics. Okay? So you should know that while discussing 4, we should always be mindful which are more important and which are less important. Okay. So while we discuss these political economic causes, to understand them, you need to know something further, which I have not told you till now. We wrote till 1690 until 17, Mughal Empire was at its peak, right? To talk further about the decline of the Mughal Empire, you continue writing where you had written that 1707, what happened? Aurangzeb died. Once Aurangzeb died, there is a period of profound serious political instability. Where? In the Mughal Empire. Once Aurangzeb died, there's major political instability in the Mughal Empire. How? Following Aurangzeb's death, I told you, there is no rule of what? There's no rule of primogeniture that the eldest son has to become the king or anything. There's no rule that the eldest son has to become the king. So what will start? A contest. मैं भी प्रधानमंत्री, है ना? अभी आपको देखेगा अगले कुछ दिनों में जिनकी 20-20 सीटें हैं वो भी बोलेंगे मैं ही प्रधानमंत्री. ठीक है. Now it will be a rude reminder for people living in North India that there are other states also. There is a party called Telugu Desam Party. Most people will have a difficult time pointing out where the Telugu, people living in Uttar Pradesh and Bihar, they will have a difficult time pointing out, oh, this party merely has 20 seats and it is saying we will form. This party has XYZ. So India's, that thing will now come up. Now, coming back here, no rules of primogeniture, but Aurangzeb's death is followed by the rise of one of his sons, Bahadur Shah, who ruled for 5 years. Aurangzeb ruled for how many? 50. But Bahadur Shah died. And in his place came for the next 1 year, and you don't need to remember these names right now. You don't need to remember the exact year for which they ruled. पर ऐसे समझ लीजिए एक 50 साल राज किया, उसके बाद वाले ने 5 साल ही की. Okay, just wait. 1712 to 1713, for 1 year, came the next on throne, Jahandar Shah. From 1713 to 19 came the next ruler, Farrukh Siyar. And from 1719 to to 1748 came Muhammad Shah Rangila, or Muhammad Shah, also known as Rangila. Why is he called Rangila? Because he's like, let's enjoy life. YOLO. You live only once. So, Bahadur Shah, Jahandar Shah, 1712 to 13, Farrukh Siyar, 1713 to 19 for 6 years, and after 1719, for the next roughly, you could say 30 years, is the rule of Muhammad Shah Rangila up till 1748. Now, why did I write it? I'm not filling in the details right now, but I'm just telling you a broad thing here. First to know. See, in 10 years, what has happened? In a span of 1719 to 1707, or in a span of 10 to 12 years, 3 rulers were gone, right? In a span of 10 to 12 years, 3 to 4 rulers had came and went, right? So you can clearly see there is a certain element of political instability that is happening where? Following the death of Aurangzeb. So, if we say that there's political instability happening following the death of Aurangzeb, will it contribute to the decline of the Mughal Empire? Obviously, yes. This is a clear example of political instability that you see in the Mughal Empire. The question then is, I can say, so cause of decline of Mughal Empire, first cause political instability because rulers were replaced in quick succession. But I've still not answered why there is political instability. You may say, sir, there is political instability because there is no clear rules of succession. There are no, we have today what? Clear rules of, today we have clear rules of succession or not? कि हर 5 साल में इलेक्शन होगा और भाई ऐसे ऐसे होगा, जिसकी ज्यादा सीट आएगी वो सरकार बनाएगा. Whoever gets more seats will form the government. There's a clear rule of succession. I said this is the beauty of democracy. Beauty of democracy is also one more that I must tell you here and should give you a way of thinking. Another second beauty of democracy that you should know from your exam point of view is this, that the civilian government or political leaders of the day enjoy more power as compared to the military commanders. Meaning, it's called civil military balance. Meaning, a military is a powerful institution. Everybody agrees in any country. Military is a powerful institution, yes or no? Yes, in any country. Okay. And politicians who are elected are also, let's say, powerful individuals. The question is, who's more powerful? Because power is a zero sum. It is not आप भी पावर रखिए, हम भी पावर रखें, सबका साथ सबकी पावर. पावर हमेशा इज अ जीरो सम इक्वेशन. ठीक है ना? So, in a democracy, you will always find that military's power is weaker as compared to whom? The civilian elected government. And who is okay with it? The military is okay with it. Meaning, military does not resist whom? The civilian elected form of government. It accepts that it is subordinate to whom? A elected civilian government. The military accepts that it is subordinate to the civilian elected government. इसमें क्या बड़ी डील है, आप क्या बड़ी बात कह रहे हैं? Historically speaking, this is a very new phenomenon. Often, you will find, as I'll explain, that military commanders often hope that one day they will become whom? Kings. And kings would often face a big threat to their power from whom? Military commander. Ask whom? Pakistan. Very rare in Pakistan that an elected government completes 5 years. Before that, it is overthrown by the military. So it's a new phenomenon world over, but democracies pride themselves on the fact that the civil military balance is in favor of whom? The civilian government. See India, and that is why it is said mature democracies have both these two things. Kya? A systematic rule-based system of transfer of power, or having a clear rule of succession. And secondly, a civil military balance, which is in favor of whom? The civilian government. देखिए आप सबने सुबह से सुना क्या? ऐसा किसी ने बोला क्या? Oh, India is having a hung parliament. Now the army will take over India. Did you hear? No. Because Indians often argue that India is a more mature democracy. You know, हम बोलते हैं कि बहुत mature, आप बार बार पढ़ेंगे ना अखबार में, mature democracy है, mature democracy है. तो mature democracy का मतलब क्या है? ये ही दो चीजें हैं. These are the two metrics on which you can say whether a democracy is mature or immature. An immature democracy is like result aaya, it's not in my favor, I don't accept the result. Okay. So for example, in Afghanistan, the elections happened in 2014. Hamid Karzai was one of the candidates. चलिए छोड़िए अब आप क्या करेंगे आप नाम जान के. But in Afghanistan, elections happened. Two major parties were there. One party won the election, the other party lost. The party which lost the election said there has been fraud in the election. We also won. So both decided, you rule for 2.5 years, we'll also rule for 2.5 years. Tomorrow, say, hypothetically, in one metaverse, NDA says, okay, you rule for 2.5 years, and UPA says, okay, we'll rule for 2.5 years. Is it a mature democracy? No. Because you are now violating the rules of succession. Whoever has the maximum number of seats will rule as long as they enjoy the majority. That's the rule, right? So you stick to the rules. You don't have an army chief saying ऐसा है आप लोगों से नहीं हो पाएगा. India needs a strong government. It is a time we need to be strong. We have to deal with Pakistan also and China also, and we can't afford leaving power in the hands of these corrupt politicians who will change party one day or the other. India needs strong, so it's time for the army to rule India. Do you hear it? No. Nobody is saying it today. And nobody has said so in the past 75 years in India. So this is the achievement of Indian democratic system. Right? So why am I telling you this? Because this is an important way you can understand what is the difference between the past and the present. And also remember that often in history you will find that those who wield military power often find it difficult to resist to take over political power. The temptation is huge. You have to resist the temptation. Why you have to resist the temptation? Because there's a very important saying, power corrupts. Absolute power corrupts absolutely. नाइन तो सबने सुनी होगी, नहीं सुनी तो मैंने सुना दी, आप सुन दी. Absolute power corrupts absolutely. If you have 10 lakh troops at your disposal, if you have the nuclear codes, कभी कभी तो आपको लग ही सकता है कि आप ही कुछ तो है, right? It's a you may feel that this is all nonsense, ऐसा नहीं होता, but you look around yourself, ऐसा ही होता है. It's rare that you will find that countries stick to a mature political process. And for good or India may have many shortcomings. The Indian democracy may have many shortcomings, but this is a strength of the Indian political system, which makes it different from a Bangladesh, which makes it different from a Pakistan, which makes it different from a Sri Lanka, and which makes it different from almost all other 50 countries which attained independence in 1947 to 60 period. Very few of them have continued as mature democracies. Okay, let's come back. So you see that there is political instability, and there is political instability. One is because there is no clear rules of succession. The question is, okay, there's no clear rules of succession. This is leading to political instability. One ruler is coming after the other. But there are other factors also which are contributing to this political instability. What are other things contributing to this instability? For understanding that, we need to understand the Mughal administrative structure. Without that, we can't understand. Any doubts till here? Anything you want to ask till here? Any question you want to ask till here? Yes. Promogenitor. Okay. Now, when you see the Mughal, and give this heading, because this you should know, Mughal administrative structure ka very basic to begin with. And this is a super important point. See, in the Mughal administrative structure, meaning what I'm trying to ask you is, or help, I want you to understand is, how if the Mughals, okay, theek hai, Aurangzeb ke time tak, they have expanded into the Deccan region by the time of Aurangzeb. Mughals are a pan-Indian empire almost, right? How did Mughals carry out the administration over such a large territory? Let me change the question. Why is it difficult to maintain a pan-Indian empire at this time? Why is it difficult? It is difficult because, one, you don't have rapid means of communication. Meaning, there is no railways, there is no telegraph. If railways is not there, you can't move troops quickly from one region to another. You can't move troops from Maharashtra to Jammu and Kashmir in a matter of few days or weeks. You can't do that because there are no quick means of transporting troops. Neither there is a quick means of communication. If there is a rebellion in Maharashtra, there is no means by which information reaches Delhi in a matter of minutes. So, if there is a rebellion in a border state, for the information to reach Delhi would take weeks, at least weeks. Okay. Secondly, if there is a rebellion in one peripheral state of the empire, mobilizing troops there may take months. So, an empire winning wars was relatively easier than holding on to those territories, because means of communication were not very well developed. That's why when the British established their pan-Indian empire, they had developed expertise in what? Communication. Two important inventions that helped the British Empire tremendously were what? Railways and telegraph. Telegraph and railways, ये सब 1850 से आना चालू हो गए थे. And they helped the British immensely for mobilizing troops also and for rapidly communicating. In revolt of 1857, railways was not developed because 1850s railways had just started. But the telegraph system connecting Calcutta to Lucknow to Delhi, all these had already been put in place. So the British could get information where the rebel troops are and communicate quickly over long distances, which the rebels could not, because rebels had no telegraph. I'm just telling you. Now, What am I telling you? I'm trying to tell you is this, that we have to understand that for an empire to sustain, especially a large empire to sustain, what you need is that some mechanism to hold on to the large amount of territories you have. You need a system that helps you hold on to the large number of territories you have. Is India a large state today? Is India a large state today? Yes. Today, India and all modern states have all rapid means of communication, have rapid means of mobilizing troops. Yes. You have the Air Force, you have God knows everything. And you also have many other things that I'll explain later today, which were not available earlier. So as compared to now, 500 years ago, building and maintaining a larger empire was a bigger challenge. For example, today in the Indian administrative structure, the steel frame, as it is called, is whom? The IAS, the Indian Administrative Services, is called the steel frame of whom? India. Okay, so this is an administrative structure, is like a skeleton. So what we want to understand is the skeleton of the Mughal empire. So let me explain that. In the Mughal administrative structure, at the top was whom? The king. And please understand, this that I'm explaining to you is a broad understanding, not too in depth, because we don't need it. Okay. King was there at the top. The king was often assisted by either the wazir, okay, and more by the council of ministers. Council of ministers. This is the king's ministers. Okay. Who were these council of ministers? They were often a part of the Mughal. They were often a part of which nobility? The Mughal nobility. Now these Mughal nobility members, they are not elected people or anything, right? There's no such election or anything. They are appointed by whom? The king. But how did the king decide whom to appoint and whom to not as his minister? It depended on many things. Their family background, their loyalty to the king, and how powerful or important or efficient they were. Many things a king would take into account, deciding who has to be in his council of ministers. So in the Mughal nobility at the center, who made the council of ministers, they were broadly three groups of ministers. And these three groups came from the Irani, the Turani, and the Hindustani groups. The Irani, Turani, and Hindustani groups. The Irani group of nobles were those who were of a Persian origin. Iran या Persian origin के nobles were called the Iranis. The name itself is explanatory. The question is, why are Persian origin people becoming a part of Mughal nobility? Where are they coming from? Right? The answer for this comes from the fact that right from the time of Humayun, Babur's son Humayun. Babur's son was Humayun, and Humayun was the ruler. Humayun spent 15 years in Persia. 15 years he spent in Persia. In these 15 years, he married amongst the Persian nobility also. And a number of their family members also came with the Mughals in India. So many of them were descendants of these members of the Persian nobility who had married into whom? The Mughals. So that is where these Persian speaking people come from. Okay. And they spoke a different language from whom? The Turanis. The Turanis are coming from Central Asia, from Turkmenistan and further in Central Asia. So they are coming from not Iran, but they're coming from Central Asia. They are of a Turkish speaking origin, Turkish language. You will be like, sir, Turkey to wahan hai. But they puri area Turkish origin ka mana jata hai because the language is of a Turkish speaking origin. So the Turanis speak a different language. Iranis speak a different language. They come from different groups. Ethnicities also. Ethnically, linguistically, they are different. Iranis would marry amongst Iranis. Turanis would marry amongst Turanis. And both these groups were Muslims. But despite being Muslims, there are Iranis and Turanis, two different groups. One is coming from Iran, the other is coming from Central Asia. The third group is Hindustani. These are nobles which included both Hindus and Muslims. And Hindustani group of nobles included, for example, the Rajputs. Okay, Rajputs were a part of the Hindustani section of the Mughal nobility. And there were Muslim nobles also, coming from where? Within the Indian subcontinent, who again spoke different language and married amongst themselves. So the Hindustani group is different from the Irani, and the Irani is different from the whom? The Turani group. For example, one of the prominent Hindustani group of nobles were the Sayyid brothers. They were Hindustani Muslims. They spoke a different language, and they are one powerful set of nobles. Another powerful set of nobles are whom? The Irani noble, origin noble Asif Jahan I. Asif Jahan I. He is of Iranian origin. Similarly, you had Turani origin also individuals. I'd want to keep names to the minimum so that you don't need to worry too much about what to remember. Different groups, different languages who would not often intermarry also. Ethnically also different, linguistically also different, culturally also different. And for example, the Hindustani groups also had people like the Rajputs. Where are the Rajputs coming into the picture? I don't want to go into a detail or in a controversy. Okay, but it would be sufficient to say that Akbar had established a working relationship with the Rajputs. A working relationship where even the Rajputs married amongst the Mughals, and prominent Rajput rulers enjoyed positions of prominence in the Mughal administrative system right from the time of Humayun. From Humayun's time to Akbar's time to even Aurangzeb's time, some of the most important Mughal nobles were Rajputs. This much is a fact. It has got no... for example, Aurangzeb's, one of the most important Aurangzeb's nobles was the Rajput ruler who was the Maharaja of Amber and Jai Singh. So basically you'll find at different times, different Rajput rulers were also part of the Hindustani section of the Mughal nobility. Why did I tell you this? Because all these three groups are there where? At the center. Whom? A part of this nobility. They all would get a fixed salary. They would get a fixed salary and would get a large number of perks and privileges. Now, below this king and the council of ministers, the empire was divided into a number of what? Provinces. The empire was divided into a number of provinces. Like which province? Awadh, like Bengal, like Hyderabad. They all would be provinces. And for these provinces, who would be appointed? To oversee administration in these provinces, the king would appoint whom? The king would appoint a governor. Okay. How would a king appoint a governor? There is no rule. The king's wish is the final word. And the king would again decide on the basis of who is loyal He would appoint them loyal, competent, whatever. But often these governors came from which group? All these governors largely came from these three groups. You had to be somehow related to these three groups. Which three groups? So, for example, the governor of, for example, I'll give you an example. Asif Jahan I, who was an Irani noble himself at the center during the time of Aurangzeb. Once Aurangzeb died, he said, I don't want to be at the center. Make me the governor of where? Hyderabad. So Asif Jahan I became the governor of Hyderabad. What you will find is that the position of governor is again a very lucrative position, a powerful position. And the Irani, Hindustani and the Turanis all wanted that they or their nephews or sons or relatives must become what? Governors. Okay? So they would often be extension of the Mughal nobility at the center, somehow related to them. And by the way, there is going to be what? A competition or not? Will there be a competition between the Iranis, Turanis and Hindustanis? There will be a competition because everybody would want that their family members must get the important ministry. अब देखिए अगले कुछ महीनों, अगले कुछ हफ्ते में, एक हफ्ते में रेल मंत्री, India's rail minister, India's finance minister, India's every important ministry will be a matter of contest between whichever coalition comes to power. Okay? नीतीश विल से चले प्रधानमंत्री नहीं तो रेल मंत्री तो हम ही बनेंगे, रेल नहीं तो वित्त तो दे दीजिए. वित्त मीन्स फाइनेंस, है ना. तमिलनाडु विल बी लाइक हम भी हैं, भूलिए नहीं. 30 is a big number. And Tamil Nadu cannot be ignored. I'll always keep saying, you ignore the cholas at your own peril. Nobody has ignored the cholas ever. Ever. I am not a Tamilian, but I am just telling you what is a sheer statement of history. You don't ignore Tamil Nadu. If you do so, you are doing at the... You are fighting not against Tamil Nadu, you are fighting against history. And one of the things about history is that one thing that we have learned from history is that we have learned nothing from history. Most people don't realize this, and you are too young and innocent. One of them you will definitely lose. Either your youth or your innocence. The question is, what will you lose first? But that was philosophical. It is only in the last 120 years that only once has happened that India has not conducted a census. 1901-2 के बाद Herbert Risley started the census, blah blah blah, whatever. India has never missed a census. You may say we missed the census because of COVID. COVID को होगा बहुत साल. But India did not still do a census. The answer is Tamil Nadu. If you have studied polity, you would know delimitation. If you have not, you will study delimitation. A lot has to happen. आपको ये पता होना चाहिए. अभी आपको इस बात का अंदाजा नहीं है. You are living through a very iconic period in history. Not just because of India, but because of China, Taiwan, USA. सब लड़ने के लिए तैयार हैं. आप देखिए, ये दुनिया एक रंगमंच है और आप कठपुतली भी नहीं है. Okay, you'll see, but it's okay. What we can't do, we should not worry about, right? But it is interesting to watch. Nonetheless, what I'm trying to tell you is that there's going to be an intense competition between whom? The Iranis, the Turanis, and the Hindustanis. But you should go and scratch your head over this, what I just told you. That what is delimitation? Or forget what is delimitation, just why India did not conduct a census for the first time in 120 years. Okay. Now, this competition is not just over appointment of whom? Governors. this competition is also over the appointment of officials below the governors. Who are they? जैसे a state today is divided into what? Districts. The state is divided into districts. Similar to that, you can say that within the province, there were a further division of a province into what are called as Jagirs. And the official appointed to administer them was called as the Jagirdar. The official appointed to head them was called as the Jagir. A Jagir, very for poor correlation, but for simplifying your understanding, a state is further divided into districts. For every district, you have a what? DM, a district magistrate. You can say a district is like a Jagir and a district magistrate is like a Jagirdar. Only for a oversimplified understanding to begin with. Think of a district like a Jagir and its administrator, the DM, like a Jagir. Okay. This is the skeleton of Mughal administrative structure. Now, who would be the Jagirdars? Who would appoint them? The king. कोई एग्जाम नहीं हो रहा जागीरदार का, डीएम का तो एग्जाम हो रहा ना, यहां कोई एग्जाम नहीं. There is no exam to select the Jagirdar. Who is appointing? King. There is no fixed tenure of the Jagirdar. The Jagirdar can be Jagirdar for 2 years also, 5 years also, depending on the opinion of the king. A Jagirdar can be transferred from one Jagir to another also. हो सकता है डीएम का भी ट्रांसफर, right? From one Jagir to another. Is डीएमशिप हेरिडिटरी? ऐसा है कि आप डीएम तो आपका बच्चा भी बनेगा, डीएम नहीं है. Jagirs were also not hereditary. If king made me the Jagir, my son automatically does not become the. If the king made me the Jagirdar, my son automatically does not become the Jagirdar. By the way, all of them are men. There is no women here, right? So that's why I'm saying son. क्या हो रहा हमारे देश की बेटियों के साथ? नहीं है. In this administrative structure, there is no space for बेटी बचाओ or whatever. So what am I trying to tell you? That a Jagirdar, but here is the point, and now you have to understand. I just said that the IAS or the Indian Administrative Structure Services, we often say, as Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel said, is the steel frame of India, because the DM is the last major powerful functionary at the local level. He is the representative of the government of India at the local level. Similarly, for the Mughal Empire's representative eyes and ears at the local level was whom? The Jagirdar. And the position of Jagirdar, as I'll explain to you, was also lucrative and a powerful position. And who would be appointed as Jagirdars? The sons, the relatives, the nephews of whom? Of the Irani, Turani and Hindustani nobles. Meaning, if you were not a part of Irani, Turani or Hindustani nobility, you really did not have a chance to become a Jagir. I hope this is clear. Everybody is appointed and removed by whom? The king. Nobody has a fixed tenure. Okay. So it is all the system which depends on whom? The king. Often, if you go and find, so this is an important point. In front of the king, nobody else is powerful. Nobody has any rights. Everything is at the discretion of whom? The king. Okay, you've understood this. Now, let me talk a bit more about this system. What? The Jagirdari system. And this I'll explain to you first. And this is important. Repeated questions. What has been asked, can be asked, I'll explain. But let's first understand this Jagirdari system. Very interesting system. देखिए, for carrying out Mughal administration in any province, at the local level, what did you need to maintain? In every province, the Mughals needed to maintain what? A standing army. In every province, they needed to maintain a regiment of the army or a section of their standing army. The idea that they can move troops from Awadh all the way to Deccan is not a very sensible idea because it will take months to do that. Even today, mobilizing army over long distances at least takes weeks. Even today, with the most advanced means of communication in the history of human civilization, right? So back then it would take months. So every region you would need to maintain a standing army so that if there is a rebellion in this area, you could crush it here itself. If there's a rebellion here, you need an army here. Every province needed to have a significant military presence in that region. Okay. Also, for administration, another important thing you need. What is that? Revenue. Yes. Without revenue, you can't carry out administration, because if you are maintaining troops, if you are maintaining jagirdars, if you're maintaining troops, if you're maintaining nobles, ministers, governors, king, all of them need salaries. And for salaries, you need to collect kya? Tax. For salaries, you need to collect revenue or tax. So for tax collection also, you need a system which should be well-functioning system, so that tax is collected regularly and efficiently. I use two words. सर एक ही बात है, regularly and efficiently. ये दोनों चीजें बहुत अलग हैं. Regular and efficient. In tax collection, they're two very different things. Okay. Meaning regular would be that every month tax is collected. Efficient would be that is it the best system to collect tax or not. I'll explain that in some time. What is the difference between regular and efficient? I'll explain in some time. But for now, you just mark. You need a system which is regular and efficient. Now, Jagirdar is very important because a Jagirdar who was appointed at the level of every district or Jagir was given two responsibilities. Which two responsibilities? To maintain troops and to collect taxes. Both the responsibilities went to whom? The Jagirdar. To maintain troops and to collect TT. Troops and tax. How and why? I'll explain. What is the primary source of revenue collection? Tax. Or what is the primary source on which tax is collected? Land. Or to be more precise, what? Agriculture? Yes. Yes. Agriculture is the primary method of, or is the primary activity in the economy, and taxation of agriculture is the primary means or is the primary source of tax. Yes. Why am I emphasizing this point? Because I want to tell you some other interesting point here and make you think. I told you Akbar expanded the empire into North and Central India. Then came Aurangzeb, expanded into Deccan. है ना? इसके पहले, for example, Ashoka was there in India. He expanded his empire, Mauryan empire. Alexander the Great का नाम सुना होगा आपने कभी? Alexander ruled from Greece and kept expanding and came all the way up to Indus. Indus मतलब पंजाब तक. From Greece to Punjab. From Greece, Turkey, Iran, everything, and all the way up to Punjab. Rulers would keep on expanding what? Their empire. The Mughals did, the Mauryans did, Alexander did, and every other ruler you would have heard of. Most likely, may not always, Cholas did. Everybody did. Every ruler from ancient to the medieval times, you would see they kept on expanding their empires when the opportunity presented. Do you see US, which is the world's biggest economy and the biggest military right now? Do you see USA grabbing territories left, right and center? Do you see that? No, you don't see that, right? Some small activities here and there you may see, but not some bigger activities aimed at grabbing कि अच्छा US is like Canada, क्या करोगे तुम? आ जाओ. You तो don't have nuclear. Canada doesn't have nuclear weapons. USA has. But USA is like ऐसा तो नहीं है ना. USA is like अच्छा आ जाओ तुम आ जाओ अंदर आ जाओ. Let me grab your territory. USA doesn't say the same to Mexico also. India has nuclear weapons. Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, Nepal, Bhutan. Did India say कि ले आ जाओ? China is a big power, right? Does China say to many other smaller countries that let me grab you today? The answer is no. Frankly, whatever China has done, for example, activities in Tibet or in Xinjiang or as claims in Taiwan and South China Sea and all of that. But let me ask you a simple question. A $16 trillion economy, the world's second biggest military power, has it captured any big territory that you can know of? Answer is no. You will find major military and economic powers today don't necessarily feel the urge to go on grabbing more territory. But that was not the case before. Why? Can anybody give an answer for that? Because the resource primarily, what he's saying is right, that in ancient and medieval times, the primary source of economic growth was, or the primary source of revenue for the state was collection of tax from agriculture. Was the collection of tax from agriculture. So what would happen is a state was like a startup. Startup everybody understands. Everybody in India now understands startup. You are all the age of startups. Why will you ask for employment? You will give employment. This is new India, right? We don't ask for employment, we give employment, right? So all of you are potential unicorns. All of you are worth at least $1 billion is a unicorn. All of you are $1 billion at least worth. Now, when you see a startup, I am saying building a state is like a startup in medieval or in ancient times. Suppose you are a very ambitious individual and you are militarily capable. You are like 100 of you are a militarily capable and skilled individual. You join the army of a state, say the Mauryan army. And then you told 100 other soldiers, what will you do fighting for the empire? You come under my leadership. I will give you salary. I will give you more money. Join my army. I am raising my own army. I am recruiting 1,000 soldiers. You join me. After 2 months, I will give you huge amount of money. You believe that yes, I am a very capable military commander. You join. I and 2,000 others, we form an army. And our army decides to attack a neighboring state. This is the story of Shivaji, by the way. This is how Shivaji raised his army and went on to raise his own army, coming from nothing as such, and said that I am raising my army. What will we do? We will go ahead and grab more land. And once we grab the land, we win the war, we grab the land, all those who fight for me will be rewarded. So what you do? You raise an army. You use that army to do what? You use that army to fight a war, to annex territory or land. And this land is, if it is a fertile agricultural land, तो क्या बात? If it is a fertile agricultural land which grows 2 or 3 crops in a year or 2 crops in a year, then you can collect twice taxes 2 times in a year. Every time the produce happens, you collect taxes. With this fertile land, now you have started collecting taxes. What can now you do? With these taxes, you can pay salary to whom? Your 2000 soldiers. And because it is a fertile agricultural land, you say, I can now afford to keep 2000 more soldiers. The fertile land, I can keep 2000 more soldiers. So you're like, salary 2000 old soldiers plus 2000 new soldiers. So now my army is 4000. So I'm like, now I have 4000 capable fighters willing to fight for me. Let's go ahead and grab more land, and more revenue. And thus bigger army. And then more land and more revenue and bigger army. You are finding a state constantly seeking to increase its military power, to grab more territory, to increase more revenue collection, to further go into a cycle, a never ending loop. This is what they're trying to do. Almost, for example, Babur. When Babur started his political campaigns, he also came almost from nothing. Shivaji also came almost from nothing. These are the guys who are known at this time also as political entrepreneurs. Entrepreneur आज ही थोड़ी आया. ये फंडिंग भी नहीं ले रहे हैं कहीं से. इनको फंडिंग की जरूरत नहीं है. सेल्फ फंडेड स्टार्टअप्स हैं. These are self-funded startups in the sense that they are saying that you believe in me. नहीं है सैलरी देने को, ये जंग हम जीतेंगे, और ये जंग जब हम जीतेंगे तो जो जो हमारे साथ खड़ा है लेगा पावर. So these are political entrepreneurs of the time. Many people believe politicians are fools. Even today, many people think politicians are corrupt, fools. Politicians are some of the most hard-working people out there, are some of the most courageous people out there, irrespective of whoever wins or whoever loses, or in sitting in opposition or in ruling party. It goes without a doubt whether that Mr. Modi, for example, also, it doesn't matter whether he was selling chai or not. That really doesn't matter. But there's no doubt that he came from almost nothing. Almost nothing, or definitely did not come from a very privileged background, but built a political fortune for himself. What he does with it is his wish. And it would have taken him decades and decades of struggle before he became the chief minister in Gujarat. It would have taken him at least 20-30 years of work before he actually, and please understand, there is no exam to become a chief minister. Middle class in India often thinks that politicians are what? Politicians are lazy, they are stupid. Politicians are neither lazy nor are they stupid. Did you think that in this election, any politician, ruling party, opposition, anybody, did you think that they were not working day in, day out? They were working like anything. Mr. Modi at 75 was doing rallies left, right, center. And whether it doesn't matter whether I appreciate XYZ party's politics or policies or not. But nobody takes away from the fact that the ruling prime minister or the opposition members, everybody were. You find a Mallikarjun Kharge in 80 years of age also doing countless rallies and speaking. Right? That takes a lot of. I can't, for example, can tell you, if you go and tell me that you go and at 2 in the afternoon stand in sun for 10 minutes, I'll be like, sir, हमसे नहीं होता है, हमको चाहिए क्या? AC. Right? So, for good or for worse, so one of the things you have to understand that politicians by their very nature are willing to take what? Risks. It's one of those professions in which the chances of getting shot is very high. Not just in India, but all over the world. Only where the risk is more, the returns are also more. Hai na? So, what keeps them driving is another matter. But they definitely are extremely hardworking individuals. There's no doubt that Mr. Modi may have worked for 12 to 14 hours every day. But there's no doubt that every Indian other prime minister also would have worked at least that much every day. That comes with the job. Right? A politician is expected to be what? Active 24/7. And some of the most intelligent arguments are made in the Lok Sabha and the Rajya Sabha and the parliamentary standing committees in India even today by the same politicians which people often ridicule to be whom? Stupid. It's not the case. Okay? It's a misconception. Okay? And doesn't matter. And frankly, it doesn't matter that how much they have, whether they have a degree or how big a degree they have. It helps obviously to be educated, but degree is not a direct correlation either. So these guys also are very enterprising and risk taking, and this is called a war state in medieval era. Today, this war state doesn't function like this. You don't find a US, a China or India doing, because agriculture or tax collection from agriculture is not the primary source of economy. What is it? Manufacturing and exporting manufactured goods or service exports, like India does IT exports. Countries are more interested in capturing markets than in capturing territories. So China wants that its goods must be sold in US. India wants its goods must be sold in US. USA wants its goods must be sold all over the world. So countries are more today interested in capturing markets rather than physically capturing territories. So the kind of aggressive territorial expansion which was often visible up till the medieval or even up till World War II has actually declined. We are living, you may feel we are witnessing a lot of wars right now, which we are. But historically, the last century, especially after 1945, has been the most peaceful era ever known in human history, where the number of wars have been relatively few. Okay, so that's it. And it is a popular saying in international relations that if goods do not cross borders, guns will. Meaning, if you allow goods to move freely, if USA finds a big market for its goods in China and China finds a big market for its goods in US, then these countries have reasons not to fight each other, because if they fight, then their markets are gone. But I'm not saying that a fight will never happen. I'm just saying economic rationale of state expansion has changed. These medieval century states are called as war states because they are constantly seeking to fight new what? Wars, constantly seeking new territorial expansion, which is something that we don't see today. मैं आपको लग रहा हूँ फालतू सारा टाइम खराब किया हमारा. क्वेश्चन आता है मेंस में. 18th century Mughal Empire was a war state. Comment. And then you will be like, ये तो हमने पढ़ा ही नहीं. हमने तो पढ़ा था causes of decline of Mughal Empire. So this is a war state. Aurangzeb is fighting where? In Maratha, Bijapur and Golconda's territory because he wants to capture their territories. Last question. दिमाग जब लग ही रहा है और माहौल बना ही हुआ है. Idea अच्छा है that you can, but will it always work? If all you needed to do was to get some 1,000-2,000 soldiers and then fight wars, capture more land and fight more wars. For such a war state idea to work, what do you need to do first? You need to win a war. आप लेके गए अपने 2,000 सोल्जर और हार गए. So will you be able to establish a war state? So first condition, you need to win the war. But second condition is also there. It's not enough for you to win the war. You have to win the war, but win it quickly and decisively. Win it quickly and decisively. Why am I saying so? Because if it's a prolonged war, it will be a long drawn out war. If it is going to be a more expensive war. Right? And if it will be a more expensive war, then even if you win it, it may not be worth it. Even if you win it, it may not be worth it. Or you are fighting over a territory which is agriculturally not very fertile. You fight an expensive war to win a piece of land which is not very agriculturally fertile. Then also the economics of fighting such an expensive war may not make sense. So you should choose your war very carefully, fight over a territory which is lucrative, win it quickly in a short amount of time so that it is not a very expensive war. Look at Aurangzeb's war. I told you, these wars that he fought for expansion into the Deccan, he fought it for how many years on and off? 30 years. 30 years is a long time. So, do you think these were quick and decisive? In fact, they were prolonged and expensive. So, what I am trying to tell you is, Aurangzeb took 30 years to expand into the Deccan, which were prolonged and expensive wars, and which though territorially increased the size of the Mughal empire, but they came at a huge financial cost. And why is it a problem? Because if the cost of expansion is very high, then your maths here will fall apart. If you spend a huge amount of money capturing a land and then the revenue generated from that land is not enough to recover the cost of the war, then you are becoming financially weaker. Look at Russia and Ukraine. Who's winning the war? Nobody knows. In fact, ये philosophical question है. War rarely throws. Very few times in wars, you will find one party decisively winning. Russia has the upper hand. It has not yet won. If it has been winning for 2 years, but yet not won. 2 साल तो होगा लड़ते हुए. And that war fighting has come at a huge expense for whom? Both Russia and Ukraine. Yes. So these are prolonged wars. These are not. Most Indians don't get this about prolonged and expensive wars. Because India since independence has not fought a single war which was prolonged and expensive. Not a single war. The 1971 war lasted for 2 weeks. Okay. The 65 war also lasted for I think a couple of weeks only. The 62 war also lasted for 2 or 3 months. That's it. Mota mota, yahi ladai. Kargil, it was a low intensity conflict or a war limited to a one particular region, which also lasted for not a very long period of time. So, I'm not saying we are not capable of fighting a long and expensive war. I'm saying we have not fought since independence. ताकि पता चला को बोला कि अच्छा ये बोलना है कि आप हम डरते हैं क्या किसी से? So I'm not saying it's a question of courage. I'm saying we've not fought. And so most Indians don't understand what a prolonged and expensive war does to the economy. Look at Ukraine and Russia. Okay. Now, coming back, what am I trying to tell you is these are prolonged and expensive wars for whom? Mughal Empire under whom? Aurangzeb. Aurangzeb does emerge victorious, but the war financially weakens the Mughal Empire, even though it territorially expands. It is an expensive war. What is the implication of this? That we'll see later. And the other aspects about administration, I'll come back to it. But I hope you got the point that not just Aurangzeb's death led to the decline of the Mughal Empire. Aurangzeb's actions also led to the decline of the Mughal Empire. As a side note, history will remember, अब तो मैं कह भी सकता हूं, क्योंकि अब जिसकी भी सरकार आए, किसी की भी आए, अब हम ये कह सकते हैं कि 2000 का नोट लाना भी मास्टर स्ट्रोक था, हटाना भी, क्योंकि जब मास्टर स्ट्रोक खेलते हैं तो उसे मास्टर स्ट्रोक कहा जाता है. Did not get the pun? It's okay, right? Demonetization will be a recorded event in history because no other Indian Prime Minister has ever dared to do so. Most Indians may have forgotten it today, but history will record it. That there once came an Indian Prime Minister who thought that it was a wise decision to stop the 1000 note and bring in 2000 note to fight black money and then remove 2000 note. History will record it. History will record many things. Good night. So tomorrow I'll give you a handout for decline of Mughals and we'll complete this topic, decline of Mughals, and then we'll talk about other things, answer writing. Thank you.